They had Bible terminology they used to use. And a lot of people don't understand Bible terminology. But yet they go out and teach. And if you don't understand Bible terminology, you're going to read something that you think is saying one thing, and it's saying something entirely different. And Matthew 24 is a prime example of this. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 24. Go ahead and read.
For Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the truth, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us.
So it says Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands. He is not entered into the temple that was built with hands, but where? He is entered into heaven, which are a figure of those things. Go ahead.
Nor yet that he should offer himself often, as the high priest enters into the holy place every year with blood of others.
Now, neither does he have to die often, like the high priests are constantly killing those sacrifices. Go ahead and read.
For then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world.
See, they offered the sacrifices for sin. So what they're saying is, if he did it often, he would be getting killed over and over again since the beginning of the world, because people have been sinning since the beginning of the world. But what did Christ do? Go ahead.
But now, once in the end of the world, hath he appeared to put away sins by the sacrifice of himself.
Wait a minute. When did Jesus put away sins by the sacrifice of himself? When he died on the cross. But it said he did this in the end of the world. Did the world as we know it end when Jesus died on the cross? No, it didn't. If it did, we would be living in a utopia right now. It would be a completely different world. But it said he died at the end of the world. But once again, the word translated there should be age. He died at the end of the age. What age? The Jewish age, the Hebrew age. And that age ended when the temple and Jerusalem was destroyed and the rest of the Hebrews was dispersed all over the world. That is what ended the Hebrew age, and all the disciples knew from talking to Jesus and from the prophets that that was right around the corner from them. They understood that. But the problem is, we don't understand that. But let's move on. Let's take another look at that. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 9. That's why you got to be careful about what you're reading. It said Christ died at the end of the world. If Christ died at the end of the world, then why is the world still going on now? It should have ended over 2,000 years ago. Because it's not talking about world as we know it. It means in age. He died at the end of the Jewish age. Or should I say, near the end of the Jewish age. Or you can say that his crucifixion started the beginning of the end of the Jewish age. 1 Corinthians 10 and 9. Watch what Paul says here. Go ahead and read.
Neither let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed of serpents.
He's talking about the Hebrews that was in the wilderness. He said, don't let us tempt Christ like the Hebrews in the wilderness tempt God and were destroyed of the serpents. Go ahead.
Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured, and were destroyed of the destroyer. Now all these things happen unto them for example.
He said, all these things happen to them, the ancient Hebrews, for an example. Go ahead.
And they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come.
He said it's written for our admonition, meaning warning, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Paul said that the ends of the world was upon them. He was saying they were living during the end of the world. But once again, the word translated world there is age. But Paul was saying he was living in the end of the age. If Paul was living in the end of the world, then the world would have been ended. It said, upon whom the ends of the world are come. That's my little age. They knew they were living in the last age of the Hebrews. That's what Matthew 24 is talking about. The end of the age. It's not talking about the end of the world as we know it. This is, when you read this, they understood that. That's why they say, upon whom the ends of the age are come. They knew they were living in the last days of the Hebrew age. Which in another class we're going to show you that people mistake that and think we're living in the last days today. We are not living in the last days today. And in the class after this, we're going to show you that. But now, let's move on. Let's go back to Matthew and pick it up at verse 16. Because we're going to show you that the disciples did not even understand Jesus' mission. They did not even understand that he had to die, resurrect, ascend, and then come back with a Matthew 24, after Matthew 24, after his resurrection, and on the day of his ascension. But first, Matthew 16 and 21. Matthew 16 and 21. Go ahead and read.
From that time forth began Jesus to show unto his disciples how that he must go unto Jerusalem, and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised again the third day.
See, from this time forth, Jesus began to tell his disciples that I'm going to be beaten and disrespected by the chief priests, and I'm going to be killed and raised again the third day. He's basically telling them, look, I'm going to die and resurrect. And we know after resurrection comes the ascension. Let's see if the disciples understood and accepted that. Go ahead and read.
Then Peter took him and began to rebuke him.
Rebuke means to correct. You can't correct the truth. The truth was this had to happen. Peter took him to the side and started correcting him. Go ahead.
Saying, Be it far from thee, Lord. This shall not be unto thee.
He said, Be it far from thee, Lord. This shall not happen to you. Why would Peter say something like that if he understood it was necessary for Jesus to come back? Because before you come back, you got to ascend. And before you ascend, you got to resurrect. And before you resurrect, you have to be crucified and die. But Peter did not understand that then. Neither did the other disciples understand that. If Peter would have understood that, he would have been sorrowful, but he would have been like, so be it. But he did not understand that. Neither did any of the other disciples. We're going to show you that none of the disciples knew before or after Jesus died that he had to leave and come back. Therefore, they could not have been asking him about the second coming in Matthew 24 because they didn't even understand that he had to leave. So let's take a look at that even further. Let's go over to Luke chapter 18 and verse 31. I tell people all the time, you cannot ask me when I'm coming back if you don't even know that I'm leaving. All the disciples thought that Jesus was going to set up his kingdom right then and there because of how it's written in the prophet. They thought the Messiah was going to come, deliver them from Roman rule, and then set up a kingdom on the earth when he showed up. They did not know anything about a second coming. Luke 18:31. Go ahead and read.
Then he took unto him the 12, and said unto them, Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and all things that are written by the prophets concerning the Son of Man shall be accomplished.
And this is chronologically before Matthew 24. Go ahead.
For he shall be delivered unto the Gentiles, and shall be mocked, and spitefully entreated, and spitted on.
So he's telling them the same thing he just said in Matthew 16. Go ahead.
And they shall scourge him, and put him to death, and the third day he shall rise again.
Now he's plainly telling them, they're going to beat me. They're going to put me to death. And on the third day, I'm going to resurrect. Watch what it says. Go ahead and read.
And they understood none of these things.
They what?
They understood none of these things.
They understood none of these things. They did not understand what he was saying. It's like he was speaking in a parable to them. If they didn't understand that he had to die and resurrect, then how could you believe that they were asking him about a second coming in Matthew 24? They didn't even believe he had to leave. They didn't even believe he had to die. If they didn't even believe that he had to die, that means they didn't think he was going anywhere. And they didn't think he was going anywhere, how can they ask him, when are you coming back? But this is before Matthew 24. You might say, well, by the time they got to Matthew 24, they understood that. We're going to show you not so. But keep reading.
And this saying was hid from them, neither knew they the things which were spoken.
It said this saying was hid from them, neither they knew the things which were spoken. They did not understand that he either had to die. So how can they understand that he had to go and come back? Because all of that comes after dying. Why would he even have to leave if he didn't even have to die? But still in Luke, go on over to chapter 19 and pick it up at verse 8. Let's see the understanding they have. How did they think the Messiah was going to